what I don't see a lot of companies do, but I'm seeing more of it, is just being really intentional about what is that experience that they want to create. Like, how do they want people to think and feel about the organization that they're joining? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be doing that completely right now, but what do you aspire for it to be? And how do you measure that and sort of see what are current perceptions against that vision? What does need to change to truly create that experience for people?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the HR Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Equitable. I am Joseph eqtble, the CEO and co-founder of Equitable. This HR Leadership series focuses on what companies are doing to understand employee satisfaction, productivity, diversity, and how leaders are approaching the moments of truth. Join us. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Equitable Leadership Series, where we talk about all things HR and HR analytics. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest with us, Emma Dawson, and we are so excited. I've been looking forward to this episode for months now. So, because really excited to have Emma on the podcast. Emma is an incredible leader in the space, leading talent development functions in companies like Dropbox, Coinbase, LinkedIn, and is an investor and an advisor in a variety of companies. So Emma, thank you so much for being here with us today. We're so excited to have you.
So great to be here, Joseph.
So we'd love to just start with just like people to know you a little bit more, like your experiences and really how you your career and how you started, and just I would love to even hear from myself. I want to hear just that story for you, how you started in the space and what your career has been like thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I feel very fortunate actually, because I found my passion really early in my career. And, back doing my undergrad, one of the areas I was studying was organizational culture. And so as part of that, I was able to do some consulting work where we did some sort of M&A and culture integration work. And I could just see the power of if you could really inspire people around a culture and foster collaboration, just how successful an organization could be. And so after I finished studying, and I'm from New Zealand, by the way, so I was studying in New Zealand, and then I went off to the UK and I spent 10 years in the UK, mainly working in quite mature organizations, I would say. And that's where I qualified as an organizational psychologist. And I would say really learnt my craft. So I was working with very experienced consultants that I was so curious, and I just learned so much in terms of really how to take a really sort of organizational development mindset to that kind of work. And so I'm really grateful for the experiences I had there. And then I've been in the Bay Area in the States for the last 10 years, working with, very different kinds of organizations, just incredibly fast moving, fast scaling, and then having to be really sort of thoughtful around how do I insert my expertise in a way that's going to give that organization the most leverage.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And so obviously you've worked in a variety of companies and unicorns. You've worked in massive organizations and conglomerates. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things and that we are seeing right now is talent, right? Hiring top talent being a challenge, but more importantly, the retention of top talent. I mean, we've seen this, we call it the great migration, whatever, there's so many names now, but why from your experience, I mean, just looking at obviously the last 2.5 years has been insane. No one anticipated what was going to happen in the world, but even just the effect that it would have on work as we know it. And so why is this whole thing of retention, especially with top talent, why is that a challenge? And what do you think from your experience that organizations can do about it? yeah, I'd love to just get that.
Yeah. And I think obviously there's some unique challenges that have come up with the pandemic, which makes this even more acute. But I mean, I think especially in the Bay Area, like the talent market has been competitive, highly competitive for an incredibly long time. Like that's been a dynamic that's been ever present. And it's really interesting actually, because when I think about retention, I think about all the data that we have gathered on, ideas like engagement over the last several years. And, we now have a really good understanding about what drives engagement. And so much of that is really around like creating an environment where people can have an impact, having great managers who really sort of see them and they give them the sense of belonging and support their development. And yet I think so often when it comes to retention, we lean towards shortcuts, and we think, okay, well, let's adjust compensation or this training program or give this person a promotion. And I think the reality is like we need to be way more proactive, and it takes time to invest in having an environment that's truly inclusive and developing managers who can really support their teams. And so I think it's like, something that if you're an organization that isn't heavily investing in those areas right now, it's like start today. Like that's something that when things get tough, when businesses go through ups and downs, I think that's a key thing. If someone feels like they are aligned to the purpose of the organization and have that support from their managers and their team, investing in that really makes a huge difference.
So a quick question on that, because you've worked at like rapidly growing companies, let's call it, like startups that turned into unicorns. And in that, and I've experienced this myself, but in that process, I'm sure one of the things that you started to see was people moving into manager roles that were less experienced. And so I know you one of the things you mentioned, great managers supporting development. So rather than like harping on that's probably one of the detriments to like employee experience at these early stage companies is managers being inexperienced. Let's focus instead on what can we do to sort of preempt that? What can startups do to essentially put their managers or their employees that are turning into managers and turning into directors, et cetera, into sort of a great position to be able to mentor their employees, care about them, improve the employee experience before we sort of like hit the bad part?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And I think so many of these skills actually are relevant even when you're in an individual contributor role. It's like, whether, even if it's not just like, say, I often think about like setting clear expectations, ability to give feedback, and ability to coach. Like if managers or ICs in the organization could do those three things, that's like 80% of the challenge, right? And so I think as an IC, like, getting familiar with that skill of setting expectations, even when working on projects and aligning with others, practicing giving feedback as part of just sort of continuous feedback processes, giving feedback to peers and asking for feedback on a regular basis. And same with coaching, like learning basic coaching questions. So I think these are the kinds of things that are kind of like everyone's skills that an organization could be investing in from the very beginning. And that would give them, to your point around getting people ready. I mean, it is so great to have people who are ready to step into management roles. And also they're like really familiar about like, what does it take to be a great manager? And they're making a really informed decision as to whether or not they want to step into that. So I love that question. And I think, sort of L&D driving those kinds of skills and having leadership really practice and demonstrate those skills from day one is really important.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've sort of seen with remote work is that need for clear, like just being clear across the board.
It's a question I quite often ask founders of like, when you're hiring and a candidate asks you like, what are your top 3 priorities and how can I contribute? What's your answer to that? Because if you want really strong talent coming into your organization, they want to have an impact. They want to connect with that vision. And so the ability to share that and always have it top of mind is really important.
I love to hear, like, in terms of what companies can do from a culture standpoint to be able to kind of position themselves appropriately for success really in the workplace.
I think that's a really good, great question. Let me think about how to best break that down. So I think the thing that we all have to have in common joining an organization is like a passion for the purpose. So I think, hiring people who are excited about that doesn't mean they need to be experts at all, but they're excited and contributing to that is really important. And then I think beyond that, we sometimes talk about how people adding to this culture, like what strengths are they bringing that they can really put into practice. And I think you have to have a culture that really allows for that. People being curious about each other, asking, what do they want to do more of? What strengths do they want to bring and play out? Being curious to different working styles, different communication styles, all of those kinds of things. And just to give like a tangible example, I think one of the things I often find in people developing to be managers is just this realization, like aha moment around like, people are energized by different things. Some people like structure, some people are unstructured. And obviously there are a lot of like different type tools that you can use to sort of get to the heart of that. But it's often a realization for people that, people show up in very different ways in the world. And I think it's a skill of a manager and a skill of the culture is to really sort of bring that out, allow space for it, and really capitalize on those strengths as an organization. So I think there's an element of like psychological safety there, a willingness to sort of show up, be creating space for people to show up and do things in different ways that are in service of that purpose.
So I've heard the theme a lot about leadership having to have a significant role sort of in this entire process. One of the things I found like to be the biggest challenge is the counterplay or the balance between employee experience, like building a culture, which you can't force, right? It needs to sort of be innate as well as like sort of nurtured with business outcomes and business focus, et cetera. How do you tie those two together? Because it's also one of the challenges that we have as people analytics product. People say, well, you're in HR, right? Here's your HR product, et cetera. And like, there's no true ROI for running analytics, let's say, or improving the employee experience, but there clearly is. So how, I'm sure you've, in your experience, connected those dots for leaders in the past, saying like, this equals this, and this is how we do it. So I'm curious if like, how you've done it in the past, if you had any like principles around there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm like, from a learning and development perspective and like a talent management perspective, I'm very into sort of metrics and baselining things and that, and, I think too often in the past, like we potentially jumped into some kind of solution. And now I think it's really important to stand back, evaluate current state. What are the current metrics on something, whether it be, I don't know, like it could be ramp time, it could be engagement, it could be retention, any of those things, and being very clear around, okay, here is the current state, here are the interventions that we're planning to make, and here are the points at which we actually think we could have realistic behavior change and measure at those points. And so I think that's really important. We do that a lot, particularly with engagement, where we might have like retention issues, and maybe we go through our engagement data, and is it a career development issue? Is it like a management issue? What kinds of things need to be done? And then making sure that we're measuring and following up regularly. One of the things that I did from a learning and development standpoint. And you actually asked me this question, like how early do L&D people typically come in these days? And, I think 10 years ago, like I think I joined LinkedIn at about 800 employees. And then now I'm seeing people come in like sub 100 employees now to come in and do this kind of work. but a program that I ran at LinkedIn, it was like, they still have that going today. It was called Manage In, we called it. We had to have an in on the end, of course. And but it was a 6-month program, and we baselined everything. We did a 360 at the beginning, and we did a 360 at the 6-month point. And we were able to measure really detailed behavior change that we'd had against our key management development attributes, which then tied back to this infrastructure, obviously, that we had at the top level, and criteria that we would hire against and measure performance against. And we also sort of kind of like A/B tested it as well. We had a group that went through it and a group that didn't, and how did that impact all of this data? So I think it was a very compelling story that we were able to put together on the impact of this work. And saying that, I think it's expensive to do that kind of level of evaluation, but it's important. And I think you just have to figure out as an L&D function, like what are our biggest investments? And what are the couple of things that we're really going to evaluate in that in-depth level?
Yeah, I mean, I think along the theme, I mean, you've mentioned, obviously, people are investing at this at much earlier stages at 100. I mean, I don't know how many years back, but if you would have looked at when they would even add a head of people or, head of talent, or I think that's even moving up earlier and earlier. We've seen companies of 15, 20 people suddenly have like a head of people role, because the employee experience is critical. So the hope is obviously that you don't really need to explain this anymore. Like, the employee experience is clearly a driver of company success, but you still have to in many scenarios. And so I appreciate that sort of connecting the dots.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I even had a founder say to me the other day, he's like, I think we're just in the, like, his view is we're in this evolution of, like, we've been product focused and now it's people focused. Like, it's the key thing we need to be driving from the outset. So I think it's very important, and really important early on. And I do think what I don't see a lot of companies do, but I'm seeing more of it, is just being really intentional about what is that experience that they want to create. Like, how do they want people to think and feel about the organization that they're joining? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be doing that completely right now, but what do you aspire for it to be? And how do you measure that and sort of see what are current perceptions against that vision? What does need to change to truly create that experience for people? Which is a very different approach than sort of saying, let's just go and see who joins and see how this evolves, which can happen quite often.
I mean, I think in the early stages, especially now, especially for us, as we see, like, you look for talent and not necessarily this elusive culture fit. And so, but at the end of the day, we have, let's say all our founders interview everyone, which definitely helps direct it a little bit, but 100%, you need to start having the conversations about, well, who are the type of people? I think Joseph has always mentioned it when we were hiring in our old days when we were on the same team together at WeWork, but we would essentially say, like, we just want to hire nice, genuinely nice people who just know how to get stuff done, which is like, that's fine, right? That's not really a definition of culture, but that's a good starting point. But you definitely have to start to really have that conversation, because people want direction, people want understanding of the company mission.
And what you just said around is a really important point. We're not wanting to do that culture fit aspect, but there are other things like what you just described of, like, the environment we want to create, or even things like, some organizations are like, we want to be really, really development centric. And, come here, we're looking for, high potential people. We'll invest in you. We invest in our managers, and they're here ready to support you. Other environments will be like, we are, very focused on performance, and we will hire fast and fire fast. And that's really what we're here to do. So, I mean, I think it's, figuring out on all these things, like what's important to you as an organization.
What is the upside of that? Like, or even downside really of hiring for potential versus experience in a workplace today?
Yeah. Well, I think this is an interesting question, because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. But I think you have to have a very different talent strategy to support, either approach. I mean, I often think it depends how much time do you have, like in terms of how fast do you need to move as an organization, as well as how much time do you actually have to invest in people development. And, I have this conversation all the time with people when I'm doing org design and really thinking intentionally about this. And I think this is another great like workforce planning question, really. Like I think workforce planning is like one of the hottest skills right now. It's like, we're talking about it a lot, but this is an example of like, sometimes when I'm sitting with a leader designing their team, it's that, and they might say, oh, I could get like a senior manager in this role, then they could develop into this. And I'm like, how much time do you have? Like, when do you actually need someone to be performing at director level for this business? And it's like, well, tomorrow. Okay, well, if that's tomorrow, we need to hire someone with experience who can hit the ground running and go. And so, but then other times I also sort of say like, a huge thing for success is like, I often say to managers, you need to make sure you have like at least half of your direct reports are high potential and can take on higher levels of work in the organization, because that is so important to scaling. Yeah. So I think ideally you always have like a balance of the two. I think if you index all the way over to like, okay, let's just get high potential people who can come in and figure it out. I think that, and there's no one there to sort of coach and guide, then I think it can waste time. And I think there are more efficient ways. And I don't think it's a great experience for that high potential talent either. So I think it's like really sort of thinking about the balance in the team, what is needed in terms of when results and have to happen, as a combination.
This has been really great, Emma. Like, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We've really enjoyed having this conversation, and it's been incredible. So thank you so much for your time and joining us.
Absolutely, it's been great fun. Thank you so much, Joseph and Gabe. Really enjoyed it.